Greetings. Before you start, I recommend subscribing to my channel so you don't miss new videos. Catherine was a bright and beautiful woman who spent her life caring for others. She was always putting others' needs before her own, and her husband, Tom, was no exception. Tom loved Catherine deeply, but he struggled to show it. He was often preoccupied with work and didn't always take the time to appreciate her. Catherine was content with their life together, but she had always hoped for something more. One day, Catherine went to the doctor for a routine checkup. She wasn't feeling sick, but she wanted to make sure everything was okay. She was shocked when the doctor told her she had cancer. The prognosis was grim. Catherine only had 2 months to live. Catherine was devastated. She didn't want to die, but she also didn't want to spend her last days in a hospital. She wanted to spend them with Tom, doing the things they had always talked about but never had the chance to do. One night, Catherine told Tom about her diagnosis. Tom was stunned. He didn't know what to say or do. He felt helpless and scared. Catherine asked him to take her away, to a place where they could spend her last days together. Tom agreed, and they started planning their trip. Tom knew that Catherine had always wanted to see the world, so he decided to take her on a trip to a remote village in South America. It was a place that Catherine had always dreamed of visiting, but they had never had the chance. Tom made all the arrangements, and soon they were on their way. The journey was long and arduous, but Catherine was determined to enjoy every moment. They arrived in the village and settled into a small cottage. The days were filled with walks in the countryside, visits to local markets, and long conversations under the stars. They talked about everything, from their hopes and dreams to their fears and regrets. As the weeks passed, Catherine's condition worsened. Tom did everything he could to make her comfortable, but he knew that he was losing her. He watched helplessly as she became weaker and weaker. But even in her last days, Catherine was full of grace and beauty. She never lost her smile or her love for Tom. One day, Catherine passed away in her sleep. Tom was devastated. He felt like his heart had been ripped out of his chest. He knew that he would never be the same without her. But he also knew that he had fulfilled Catherine's last wish. She had died surrounded by love and beauty, in a place that she had always wanted to be. Tom decided to stay in the village for a while, to grieve and come to terms with Catherine's death. He spent his days wandering the countryside, remembering the moments they had shared together. He felt lost and alone, but he also felt grateful for the time they had had together. A year later, on the anniversary of Catherine's death, Tom decided to visit her grave. He made his way through the village, feeling a sense of sadness and nostalgia. He reached the small cemetery where Catherine was buried and stood before her grave. As he stood there, lost in thought, he heard a voice behind him. It was a woman's voice, soft and gentle. Tom turned around and saw a woman standing there. She was beautiful, with long dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Tom felt a sense of familiarity, but he couldn't place her. The woman smiled at him and said, "Hello, Tom. It's been a long time." Tom was stunned. He didn't know who she was, but he felt like he should. He asked her, "Do I know you?" The woman's smile faded, and she said, "Yes, Tom. You do. I'm Catherine." Tom was taken aback. He didn't know what to say. He had buried Catherine a year ago, and now she was standing in front of him, alive and well. He wondered if he was dreaming or if he had lost his mind. Catherine seemed to sense his confusion. She said, "I know this is hard to understand, but it's true. I'm here, Tom. I never left you." Tom felt a surge of emotion. He wanted to reach out and touch her, to feel her warmth and know that she was real. But he held back, afraid that he was imagining things. Catherine spoke again. "Tom, I know this is hard to accept, but I need you to trust me. I'm not a ghost or a spirit. I'm alive, and I need your help." Tom was still in shock. He asked, "How is this possible? You died. I buried you." Catherine took his hand and said, "I know it seems impossible, but it's true. I'll explain everything. But first, we need to leave here. It's not safe for us to talk here." Tom looked around the cemetery, feeling a sense of unease. He didn't know what was going on, but he trusted Catherine. He nodded and said, "Okay, let's go. Sorry, before continuing, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel." "Thank you." They left the cemetery and made their way through the village. Tom kept looking at Catherine, trying to understand what was happening. She looked the same as she always had, but there was something different about her. She seemed more alive, more vibrant than ever before. As they walked through the village, Catherine explained to Tom what had happened. She had been diagnosed with a rare and deadly form of cancer, and the doctors had given her only 2 months to live. She didn't want to spend her last days in a hospital, so she had asked Tom to take her away. Tom had taken her to a remote village where he had found a cottage for them to stay in. They had spent their days exploring the countryside, talking, and just being together. Catherine had felt happy and at peace, knowing that she was spending her last days with the man she loved. But then something strange had happened. Catherine had woken up one morning feeling different. She had felt stronger, healthier, like the cancer was gone. She had gone to the doctor, and he had confirmed that the cancer was gone. It was a medical miracle. Tom couldn't believe what he was hearing. He asked, "But if you were cured, why didn't you come back to me? Why did you let me think you were dead?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She said, "Tom, I wanted to come back to you, but when I tried to leave the village, I found that I couldn't. Every time I tried to leave, something would happen to prevent me from going. I tried everything, but nothing worked. I was trapped there." Tom was horrified. He asked, "Trapped? What do you mean, trapped?" Catherine said, "I don't know. It's like the village didn't want me to leave. Every time I tried, something would happen to stop me. And then, after a while, I realized that I was pregnant." Tom's eyes widened in shock. He asked, "Pregnant? How is that possible?" Catherine said, "I don't know, Tom, but it's true. And I think that's why I couldn't leave the village. I think the baby somehow kept me there." Tom was overwhelmed. He didn't know what to think or feel. He had lost Catherine, buried her, and now she was alive and pregnant. He didn't know how to process all of this. Tom asked Catherine, "What did you do? What happened next?" Catherine said, "I stayed in the village. I couldn't leave, and I didn't want to risk losing the baby. I gave birth to a little girl, and I named her after my mother. I raised her in that village, and she was happy and healthy. But I was always aware that we were trapped there, that we couldn't leave. And then, one day, my daughter started getting sick. She had the same cancer that I had had." Tom's heart broke as he listened to Catherine's story. He asked, "What did you do?" Catherine said, "I tried everything. I took her to doctors, to healers, to anyone who could help. But nothing worked. She was dying, just like I had been. And then, one day, I woke up and I knew what I had to do. I had to find you, Tom. I had to find you and bring you back to the village to save our daughter." Tom asked, "And did you? Did you find me?" Catherine nodded. She said, "I went on a journey, a long and difficult journey, but I found you, and I brought you back to the village. And you saved our daughter, Tom. You saved her." Tom was in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had thought that Catherine was dead, but all this time she had been alive, raising their daughter in a village that he had never even heard of. And now their daughter was alive and healthy, thanks to him. He asked, "Where is she? Where is our daughter?" Catherine said, "She's here, Tom. She's in the village. She's waiting for you." Tom couldn't believe it. His wife was alive, and they had a daughter together. He asked Catherine, "Can we go to her? Can I see her?" Catherine nodded. She said, "Yes, of course. But there's something you need to know first. Tom asked, "What is it?" Catherine took a deep breath and said, "Our daughter is dying. She has the same cancer that I had, and there's nothing anyone can do to save her. She doesn't have much time left." Tom felt like his world was falling apart. He had just found out that he had a daughter, and now he was going to lose her too. He asked, "How much time does she have?" Catherine said, "A few weeks, maybe a month. It's hard to say." Tom didn't know what to do. He had just found out that his wife was alive and that they had a daughter, and now he was going to lose her. He asked, "Can I see her now? Can we go to her?" Catherine nodded and led Tom through the village to a small hut at the edge of the village. They went inside, and there was a little girl lying on a bed in the corner. She was small and frail, but she had Catherine's eyes and Tom's smile. Tom couldn't hold back his tears as he looked at her. He said, "What's her name?" Catherine said, "We named her Sarah, after your mother." Tom reached out and took Sarah's hand. He said, "I'm sorry I wasn't here for you, Sarah. I'm sorry I missed so much." Sarah looked up at him and smiled weakly. She said, "It's okay, Daddy. I'm glad you're here now." Tom felt like his heart was breaking. He couldn't believe that he had missed so much of his daughter's life, and now she was going to die. He stayed with her for the rest of the day, holding her hand and talking to her. He promised her that he would never leave her again. That night, Tom slept in the hut with Catherine and Sarah. He held Sarah's hand as she slept, and he knew that he would never forget this moment, no matter what happened. The next morning, Tom and Catherine talked about what they were going to do. They both knew that Sarah didn't have much time left, but they wanted to make the most of the time that she had. They decided to stay in the village for as long as Sarah needed them, and to take care of her in her final days. Over the next few weeks, Tom and Catherine spent every moment they could with Sarah. They played with her, read to her, and talked to her. They wanted her to know that she was loved, and that they would be there for her until the end. As Sarah's condition worsened, Tom and Catherine knew that they had to prepare for the worst. They talked to the village elder and arranged for a burial plot for Sarah. They also talked to the local doctor and made sure that Sarah was comfortable and pain-free. One day, as Tom was sitting with Sarah, she looked up at him and said, "Daddy, I don't want to die." Tom felt his heart break. He said, "I know, Sarah. I don't want you to either." Sarah said, "Will you be okay when I'm gone?" Tom said, "No, Sarah. I don't think I'll ever be okay again." Sarah said, "I love you, Daddy." Tom said, "I love you too, Sarah. More than anything." That night, Sarah passed away in Tom's arms. He held her and cried, knowing that he had lost his daughter before he ever really got to know her. He stayed in the village for a few more days, grieving for Sarah and trying to come to terms with his loss. One day, he knew that it was time to leave. He said goodbye to Catherine and the villagers and made his way back to the United States. Tom returned to his life in the United States, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had left something behind in that remote village. He couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and the time that he had spent with her. He felt guilty for not being there for her when she needed him the most. Tom tried to move on with his life, but he found it difficult to do so. He started drinking heavily and became distant from his wife and son. He couldn't bring himself to talk about Sarah, and he couldn't bear the thought of going back to the village and facing the reality of her death. One day, Tom's wife asked him what was wrong. Tom broke down and told her everything. He told her about Sarah and how he had left her in the village to die. He told her about his guilt and his grief and how he couldn't move on with his life. Tom's wife listened patiently and then said, "Tom, you need to go back to that village. You need to face your guilt and your grief, and you need to find closure." Tom knew that she was right. He booked a flight to the nearest airport and made his way back to the remote village. When Tom arrived in the village, he was greeted by Catherine and the other villagers. They welcomed him back with open arms and asked him how he was doing. Tom told them that he was struggling and that he needed to visit Sarah's grave. Catherine took Tom to the burial plot that they had prepared for Sarah. As he stood there, looking down at the small wooden cross that marked her grave, he felt a flood of emotions wash over him. He felt guilty for leaving her there, but he also felt a sense of peace knowing that she was no longer suffering. As Tom stood there, lost in thought, he heard a voice behind him. "Hello, Tom." Tom turned around and saw a young girl standing behind him. She looked about 6 or 7 years old, and she had a familiar face. Tom asked, "Who are you?" The girl said, "My name is Lily. I'm Sarah's daughter." Tom felt like he had been punched in the stomach. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He said, "What do you mean? Sarah never had a daughter." Lily said, "She did. She had me. I was born a few months after you left the village." Tom couldn't believe what he was hearing. He felt a mixture of shock, confusion, and disbelief. He asked Lily, "How is this possible? How could Sarah have had a daughter without me knowing about it?" Lily said, "Sarah didn't want to burden you with the news. She knew that you had your own life to live, and she didn't want to disrupt it. But she loved you, Tom. She loved you so much." Tom felt a sense of overwhelming guilt wash over him. He realized that he had abandoned Sarah and their daughter, and that he had missed out on so much of their lives. He felt like he had failed them both. Tom asked Lily to tell him more about her mother and their life together. Lily told him about how Sarah had struggled to make ends meet after he had left, but she had never given up hope. She had worked hard to provide for her daughter, and she had never lost her love for Tom. Lily told Tom about the times when Sarah would talk about him and how much she missed him. She told him about the day when Sarah had received the news about her illness and how she had held her daughter tight and cried. Tom felt like he was reliving the pain of Sarah's illness and death all over again. He felt like he had missed out on so much, and he felt like he had let Sarah down. Lily said, "My mom always said that you were the love of her life. She never stopped loving you, Tom. She never gave up on you." Tom felt tears streaming down his face. He realized that he had never stopped loving Sarah either, and that he had never truly moved on from their time together. He knew that he had to make things right. Tom asked Lily if she would come back to the United States with him. He wanted to give her a better life and be a part of her life. Lily agreed, and they made their way back to the airport. As they were waiting for their flight, Tom saw a poster on a wall advertising a charity run for cancer research. He knew what he had to do. Tom organized a team to participate in the charity run. He knew that he could never make up for the pain he had caused Sarah and Lily, but he wanted to do something to honor her memory and help others who were struggling with cancer. As the day of the run approached, Tom felt nervous. He had never been much of a runner, but he was determined to finish the race in honor of Sarah. The day of the race was bright and sunny, and the atmosphere was electric. Tom and his team lined up at the starting line, and Tom looked up at the sky and whispered, "This is for you, Sarah." As the race began, Tom felt a surge of energy. He felt like he was running for his life, and he felt like he was running towards Sarah. The course was challenging, with steep hills and rough terrain, but Tom refused to give up. He pushed himself harder than he ever had before, and he felt like he was flying. As he crossed the finish line, Tom felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had done it. He had finished the race in honor of Sarah, and he had raised thousands of dollars for cancer research. As Tom walked back to his car, he heard a voice behind him. "Tom?" He turned around and saw Lily standing there, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Tom," she said. "Thank you for doing this for my mom." Tom hugged Lily tight, and he felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He knew that he could never make up for his past mistakes, but he knew that he could try to make a difference in the present and the future. And as he walked away from the race, Tom felt like he was finally able to let go of his past and move forward with his life. As Tom drove home from the race, he felt a sense of peace and closure. He had done everything he could to honor Sarah's memory, and he had tried to make amends for his mistakes. But as he pulled into his driveway, he saw a figure standing on his front porch. It was Sarah. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he got out of his car and walked towards her. "Sarah," he whispered, "is it really you?" Sarah smiled at him, and Tom saw that she was healthy and vibrant, as if she had never been sick. "Yes, Tom," she said. "It's me." Tom felt tears in his eyes as he hugged Sarah tight. "I thought you were gone," he said. "I am gone," Sarah said. "But I wanted to come back and tell you that I forgive you. I know you made mistakes, but I also know that you love me. And that's all that matters." Tom felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders as he looked into Sarah's eyes. He knew that he could finally let go of his guilt and move on with his life. As Sarah disappeared into the ether, Tom smiled to himself. He knew that he had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. From that day forward, he lived his life with purpose and passion, and he knew that Sarah was with him every step of the way. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, because without a subscription, watching 99% of viewers, which is why so often I remind.